We've had this picture-perfect family that we've been following for some time now, and we are in 2 Samuel. We're going to be in, whoa, oh, you have another song, don't you? Wait, you want to sing that one? Okay. No. You have to, what do you got, though?
I don't know where you're at. I just put it on a random.
Oh, okay. No, this is it. I remember there were 4 of them. I was thinking, I thought, man, that's a lot for a Wednesday night. I told you I was quit. I'm there.
Oh, this is you?
Yeah, I'm there. I spliced it. You're good. I thought you had a lot of songs.
Family Mess?
That works, yeah. Thanks for giving away my punchline. Okay. Very good. All right, so we had this picture-perfect family, like for all these decades as we're going through, especially 2 Samuel with David, and he has these, all these kids, and we read about how good-looking they are, and that he's been so successful in his reign as king. Well, then things start to turn just a little bit. Then we have murder that's introduced into this perfect family. We have lust, we have adultery, we have lies. And we have incest, and we have more murder. And as you've already seen, thanks a lot, Bradley, we have a real mess on our hands by the time we're finished. And this mess is just going to be part 2 tonight, really. It's going to continue. I say that, there's a little bit of a reprieve in it tonight. And it sounds like things are getting so much better in all of the drama that's been experienced in this family. We're really going to get into chapter 15, though, some fireworks if you think we haven't seen them just yet. Okay, so we're in chapter 14 of 2 Samuel tonight, but I'd really like to back up in the last 3 verses where we left off last time. So we're going to be talking about another son of David. Now, we were introduced to him last week and actually spent a chunk of the chapter on him, but the real spotlight was shining on whom in chapter 13, at least early on in his terrible deeds. What son of David? He did bad things. What's his name? Amnon. Very good. So Amnon, and you tell me how to say it, and I'll say it that way, okay? So Amnon or Amnon, perhaps. But Amnon, he commits, of course, the incestuous relation, or has the incestuous relationship with his sister. And how does Absalom, his half-brother, take care of this? All right. He has him executed at the hands of his servant. Well, he's committed cold-blooded murder. And speaking of cold, perfect revenge is served cold. We talked to John, brought that out last week. He waited how long, does anybody remember, before he executed his plan on his brother? 2 years. Very good, Lizzie. And I heard coming from several others. Good memories. Nicely done. So we're in verse 37, just to recollect where we stand of chapter 13. Verse 37, after he does this, but Absalom flees, and he went to, this has actually served as our memory work, which is a little challenging for about 3 names that are listed there. He went to Talmai, the son of Ammihud, king of Geshur. And David mourned for his son every day. Okay, we didn't really have time to get into why exactly it is. Of course, we know where the royal palace is, and not only where David, but as well where his family's staying. And that's in the city, of course, of Jerusalem, which has become for some time now the capital of Israel. So Absalom picks up ship, and he moves way up to the northeast in the land of Geshur, and his dad's all the way down southwest, and he goes all the way up northeast. Okay, so why does he go so far away? We did discuss this last week, but we didn't get into another reason probably why. First of all, there's what? Geographically. All right, basically he's getting as far away as he can, right? Because he's undoubtedly fearing for his life, and for good reason. Probably even his dad wants to take revenge on his own son. So he stays up here for some time, but this is something to which we didn't get last week. I'd ask for you to turn backward to chapter 3 of this same book. 2 Samuel 3, and we're going to read verses 2 and 3. 2 Samuel 3, 2 and 3. And sons were born to David at Hebron. This is back when the capital's still there. His firstborn was Amnon, or Amnon. Okay, yeah, we know about him. He's no more. Of Ahinoam of Jezreel, and his son Kileab of Abigail, the widow of Nabal of Carmel. Remember, his name means fool, and appropriately, he's a foolish man. And the third, Absalom, the son of Maacah, but notice from whom she came, the daughter of Talmai, king of Geshur. Okay, so Absalom's mother, Maacah, is the daughter of the ruler of this place, which would make the ruler of this place who relative to Absalom? Yeah, there you go. So he's just keeping it in the family, isn't he? So when we go back to our text of 2 Samuel 13, verse 37, Absalom fled and went to Talmai, the son of Ammihud, king of Geshur. Why does he go there? Well, that's Grandpa. And you really think Grandpa's going to do anything to harm his grandchild? He finds sanctuary, asylum in that place. And also, he's probably living pretty high on the hog whenever he's there. So he just jumps from one kingdom to another, from one palace to another. He's a pretty sharp guy. And what we're going to find as we move forward in these chapters, that Absalom seems to be a real manipulator of people also. And he may be doing that with his grandpa while he's staying up in that place. Now we're told right after that in verse 37, David mourned for his son every day. Which one? The one that's dead, or the one that's dead while he's still alive? Which one is it? You know, there's a good chance he's probably mourning for both of them. The statement could be applied either way. Verse 38, I think, is probably his deceased, by the way, in that spot. So Absalom fled and went to Geshur to stay with Granddad in the palace, and he was there for 3 years. And King David longed to go to Absalom, for he had been comforted concerning Amnon because he was dead. Okay, there are two things I want to bring out about this verse. He longed to go to him, and again, we talked about last week, this could be understood in two different ways about the comfort that's been supplied. I want to read, before we move on, from the NIV, okay, admittedly not word for word, but translating as seems best the translators thought the idea. And King David longed to go to Absalom, for he was consoled concerning Amnon's death. In other words, it's like, well, I miss my son, and I've gotten over the fact of what happened. I just want to repair and reconcile our relationship together. It kind of sounds that way, doesn't it? Okay, now I'm going to read from the Message translation. The king finally gave up trying to get back at Absalom. He had come to terms with Amnon's death. Sounds along the same way. And then I'd like to read from the CEV. David still felt so sad over the loss of Amnon that he wanted to go take his army there, but to capture him, to capture Absalom. Again, I can see either one of these being the case. I'm not so sure what it isn't really leaning more in the other direction, that he might want to go there to try to get revenge on his son, that he's still so upset. But again, there are a couple of different ways of looking at it. This much is for sure, and this we didn't get to discuss last week either. Why is it that David is starting to experience all this hardship in his life, and especially with his family? Up to this point, David's reign's been great. Up to this point, for the most part, things have been pretty good in his family. Why is he starting to experience all this calamity at home? Because of sin. Go back to chapter 12. Chapter 12, verses 9 through 11. Nathan the prophet said to David, the king, "Why have you despised the commandment of the Lord to do evil in his sight? You have killed Uriah the Hittite with the sword. That's murder. You have taken his wife to be your wife. You committed adultery with her. And you've killed him with the sword of the people of Ammon. Now, therefore, as a penalty, the sword shall never depart from your house. God says, because you have despised me and have taken the wife of Uriah the Hittite to be your wife, thus says the Lord, behold, I will raise up adversity against you from your own house." This, Bradley, is a penalty on the sin that David has committed. And this is just, the very small beginning of all of the consequences that are going to come from the sin that David committed with Bathsheba and the murdering of Uriah. Okay, so that takes us now into our true text for tonight. Chapter 14, and I hate to do this, but verse 1 so happens to be our memory verse. Who would like to say that for us? I'll admit to you that I felt like there wasn't, just strangely, and it's usually hard to select. This is kind of difficult to find a good one, I felt like. So it's about the best I could do. Gives us the premise for all of this chapter, really. 14:1. So Joab, the son of Zeruiah, perceived that the king's heart was concerned about Absalom. Well, who wouldn't be? This is still his son, even after everything that's happened. But how long has it been that we last read since the king has seen his son? Last that we saw, he stays there how long? Okay, 3 years. That's a long time for a father and child, and not to have any communication with each other, not to see each other's faces. And Joab could tell, the king's bothered by this, and he should be. He's a father, makes a lot of sense. So Joab, I'm sorry, go right ahead.
I was just wondering, seems like rape, back then the penalties were so harsh or everything that it would have been, death would have been a righteous punishment.
Mm-hmm.
So why did Absalom have to flee if he kind of did like the rightful thing?
As in killing his brother?
Yeah.
Oh, I don't believe he did the rightful thing at all.
But
Yeah.
So like it would have been right if like law or a
Mm-hmm.
soldier
He just took it into his own hands. Yeah, and just murdered his brother is what he did. Now,
because back then, didn't family members like avenge?
you could, right, good. Yeah, you could have the right. Now for rape, I don't know that they would have the right to avenge. Now for killing, yes, they would. But yeah, he just bypassed law and did it all himself. Judge, jury, and executioner. That's what he became, yeah. Now, that being said, we did have the discussion also, who's king?
Well, and that's one point, not to just follow everything on David.
Right.
It's not much of a fall.
No, doesn't seem to be. Doesn't seem to be. And as great of a king as he was in his early days, he doesn't seem like he's that tremendous of a king in his latter years. By the way, chip off the old block. What are we going to see in Solomon's life? Tremendous early on. Not very good at all in the later years. And so, yeah, there's a real case to be made. Why didn't David as king do something? We know he understood. He heard about this and he was angry. It's rape, and he does nothing about it. Do you think he would let this go on unpunished with anyone else? But he does in his own family. It's like he's showing some partiality with his own, and maybe his brother almost feels compelled. Well, someone has to get justice for her, and he bypasses law, though, to do such a thing. So, yeah, I don't believe he was in the right at all to do what he did. David undoubtedly probably should have done something about his son. Doesn't seem to do a whole lot. The king's heart is concerned about Absalom. Joab, his commander, he perceives this. And he thinks, well, I'm going to try to do something to reunite and to bring the son home. Also in consideration, he probably thinks this is king in waiting. This is the dynasty. We want to make sure that this continues, and we got to get him back if we're going to groom him for the throne. So in verse 2, Joab sent to Tekoa, and remember we are in Jerusalem as far as the king himself goes, and Tekoa is just, give or take about 10 miles down to the south on the map. So Joab sent to Tekoa and brought from there a wise woman and said to her, please pretend to be a mourner and put on mourning apparel. Do not anoint yourself with oil, but act like a woman who has been mourning a long time for the dead. Go to the king and speak to him in this manner. So Joab put the words in her mouth. And I know we haven't read it yet, but who can tell us just in an encapsulating way what she's going to tell David based on what Joab, his good friend, has suggested to her? What's she going to do here? Okay, she's going to try to manipulate him. Some might say to help provoke and prod him. You can make that case for sure. She's going to make up a story that's not true to try to convince him. Now, is this right for her to do? You tell me. But why do you think Joab would have this idea of trying to use a story, the pseudo story, to try to convince him to do something about bringing his wayward son home?
Because one was told to David when he
Very good. Makes a lot of sense, doesn't it? Look back just a little bit in chapter 12. Chapter 12, verse 1. After about a year, then the Lord sent Nathan to David, the prophet. And he came to him and he said to him, there were 2 men in one city, one rich and the other poor. And he gives this story about a beloved lamb. We have no indication that this actually happened. Does the prophet do anything wrong here if this isn't an occurrence that actually transpired? I don't believe so. How many times does Jesus give it just an earthly story illustrating something? Okay? And we know in verse 5, David's anger is greatly aroused against the man in the story. He says to Nathan, as the Lord lives, keep that terminology in mind. He gives his verdict once he hears this story. As the Lord lives, the man who has done this thing shall surely die. He needs to restore fourfold for the lamb. He did this thing. He had no pity. Then Nathan, trying to contract them, said to David, you are the man. In verse 13, that's what it took. So David said to Nathan, I have sinned against the Lord. So Joab concocts this plan involving this wise woman, and he says, here's exactly what you need to tell him. Tell him about this story that comes from your life to try to get him to side with you, and then essentially turn this into the relationship of David with his son. I agree with you, Marcy. He probably has in mind, if he knows about it, it makes sense that he would, that someone has had success doing this not that far back and thinks, well, maybe that's what it's going to take to get the king on our side. So verse 4, the woman of Tekoa, back in our chapter 14 text. Verse 4, when the woman of Tekoa spoke to the king, she fell on her face to the ground and prostrated herself and said, help, O king! Then the king said to her, what is it that troubles you? She answered, indeed, I am a widow. My husband is dead. Now your maidservant had 2 sons, and the 2 fought with each other in the field. And there was no one to part them, but the one struck the other and killed him. And now the whole family has risen up against your maidservant. I'm suffering the consequences of this. And they said, deliver him who struck his brother, that we may execute him for the life of the brother whom he killed. And we will destroy the heir also. So they would extinguish, she says, my ember, the little burning fire, what's left of it, and leave to my husband neither name nor remnant on the earth. Okay. Now, I think you could say these are questionable tactics. She's not telling just a hypothetical story. She said, this is what's going on in my life. That's not exactly true. Again, I'll let you decide whether this is the most moral thing to do or not. Nevertheless, she's tugging at his heartstrings and tells this story about her husband died, and there are these 2 brothers who are her sons, and they have a struggle, and one kills the other, and now they want to kill the other one. She'd have no male left, which puts her in a real predicament societally. Verse 8, then the king said to the woman, go to your house, and I will give orders concerning you. Some take this that the king's just trying to pass her off. Oh, okay, yeah, well, I'll put that on my docket and we'll address that later on, and maybe he doesn't intend to do so. I'd like to think more of David than that. But this woman doesn't accept his answer. Well, if she just wants, some help here, and he says, well, I'm going to give you help and whenever the time's right, why wouldn't she just accept it? She continues in verse 9. The woman of Tekoa said to the king, my lord, O king, let the iniquity be on me and on my father's house, and the king and his throne be guiltless. All right, so maybe David needs to think this through, and he's afraid, well, people are going to accuse me of handling this the wrong way, and then I'm going to be guilty of that man's blood, or my administration. And she says, well, don't worry about that. I'll sign off on it, and I'll accept all legal repercussions from it. Anything that would be fallback will come on me. So the king says, whoever says anything to you, just bring him to me, and I'll take care of it. He shall not touch you anymore. And this should pacify, you would think, the woman. She's still not pleased, though. Verse 11, then she said, please, let the king remember the Lord your God. So she invokes God's name into this scenario. And do not permit the avenger of blood, which goes back to the comment that Marcy made. There's killing involved, family can get involved. You have the cities of refuge to which they can flee and have a legal trial and all that kind of stuff, protection for a while. Please remember the Lord your God. Do not permit the avenger of blood to destroy anyone, lest they destroy my son, and it's going to be too late. So notice the king's response now. As the Lord lives, he gives his official judgment here, not one hair of your son shall fall to the ground. I'm going to intervene, and I'm going to make sure that you and he, your family moving forward, are taken care of. Does that sound familiar at all? As the Lord lives, here's officially remember what is stated in what we read in chapter 12. The king's declaration. As the Lord lives, the one who did this shall... Okay, so very similar right here. The conclusion that's reached based on someone else's story that tugs at the heartstrings of the king. Verse 12. Therefore the woman said, please let your maidservant speak another word to my lord the king. She's really trying his patience today. Okay, yeah, I'll take care of it later on. Well, if you could... Okay, I'm going to make sure if anyone bothers you, bring them to me and I'll slug them. You don't have to worry about that. Well, what I'm really wanting is, okay, anything you want, blank check, here you go. Okay, if I can just interject one more thing. All right, so she has this one more thing here. Please let your maidservant speak another word to my lord the king. And he said, okay, say on, speak. What do you have on your mind? So the woman said, why then have you schemed such a thing against the people of God? Becoming kind of bold in this final statement she has to make to the ruler. She continues, for the king speaks this thing as one who is guilty. You are the one. He's heard this before, hasn't he? Okay, as the Lord lives, this is what should happen in this circumstance. To which Nathan replies, you are the man. You are guilty. And he gives his judgment. As the Lord lives, not one hair of your son, even though he's committed this terrible atrocity, should fall to the ground. And the woman says, you, O king, are the man. You're guilty. And that the king does not bring home his banished one again. For we will surely die as a people. We will become like water spilled on the ground, which cannot be gathered up again. If you don't fix this now, it's never going to be fixed. Yet God does not take away a life, but he devises means so that his banished ones are not expelled from him. What does she mean by this? Well, you go back to verse 11, the final appeal that she makes to the king as far as the third one to get his declaration that's official and it's his decree. Verse 11, please let the king remember the Lord your God. Do not permit the avenger of blood to destroy anyone lest they destroy my son. Now, if her story is true, the boy deserves to die, right? Why does she bring the Lord's name in it? And please, she says, remember the Lord your God in your decision, and don't let my son be destroyed. David is in a powerful spot right here. And if he makes the decision for this son, which doesn't even exist, but even if that's the case, if he makes for this decision for justice not to be administered, how would he be acting like God? We know that God is just. God is righteous. What appeals to us about God more than anything else? And why is it that any of us has a fighting chance to stand before him? There you go. Remember how merciful God is and how he doesn't give people what they deserve. Okay, so this tactic has been successful in the recent past with David, paralleling a story with his life. But why might that plea be especially soft on his heart at this moment? Remember who God is, and he doesn't always give people what they deserve when they should die. Sometimes he extends to them mercy, and he lets people who should die live. You think this might not strike a chord with David and what he's recently experienced? Undoubtedly, the news has reverberated throughout the kingdom, and as God said, it has caused embarrassment even outside of the borders of my people. David should have died just recently by the justice of God. But his mercy said, it's okay. You know, he confessed his sin as his child. And he says, I put away your sin. Now, there are going to be some terrible consequences physically from this. But spiritually, I've forgiven you. You're white as snow. And so she asks about this hypothetical son she has. You know, she says he's really her son. It's not the case. But she says he should die. And I plead to act as God himself. As God the king, you're a king. Show mercy toward my son. Now, as we go back to verse 14, I think that that's probably what she has in mind. If you don't bring your banished one home, the dynasty's in trouble. Who are we going to pass the kingdom on to? This guy's been groomed. He's going to be perfect. She's thinking. Joab's thinking. The whole nation, we're going to find very soon, is thinking this is going to be the perfect replacement to come in later on in David's old age or when he dies. Verse 14, we will surely die, become like spilled water on the ground, cannot be gathered up again. You're not going to be able to fix the issues in the kingdom. And consider who God is. He does not take away a life, but he devises means so that his banished ones are not expelled from him. He forgives, and he gives people second chances. And so she's making this plea of David concerning his son. Give him a second chance. Bring him back home. The kingdom needs him. That's what God would do. That's what you should do. Now, whether that's what God would do or not, we could have that debate. But that's what the argument is that's being brought to the king. Verse 15. Now, therefore, I have come to speak this thing to my lord the king, because the people have made me afraid. Okay. So she's saying that's what people are saying in the kingdom that need to take place. And that's the reason I've come to you, kind of as an ambassador on their behalf. Now, morality, okay, you could argue, is this the right way of going about it? What has motivated her to go to the king? Because all of her friends and all of her family and everyone from tribe to tribe saying, hey, we need a spokesman to go talk to David. Why is she gone? Because as far as we know, one person has talked to her and said, hey, we need to hire your services. You're really eloquent and you're a really smart lady. My guess is she probably hasn't gone before the king, risking her life, lying to him and traveling 10 miles over difficult terrain for nothing. She's probably been paid, and I would guess likely very well, to go up and to do this job. So she's fabricated not only her story, but as well it appears to be her motivation for going and having this conversation with David. Now therefore I've come to speak. The people have made me afraid. And your maidservant said, okay, well I'll do it when no one else will, out of the goodness of my heart. I'm not sure that's the case, but I now will speak to the king. It may be that the king will perform the request of his maidservant. For the king will hear and deliver his maidservant from the hand of the man who would destroy me and my son together from the inheritance of God. And she's not backing off of her story even just yet either. She's saying, no, I really had the purpose also of coming to you. I need to talk to you about my family and my son also. But I think there's a good parallel that could be drawn with your family and your son. Verse 17, your maidservant said, the word of my lord the king will now be comforting. For as the angel of God, whom they understand to be a manifestation of deity himself, we understand to be Jesus. For as Jesus, we would say in our time, so is my Lord the king, as the King of kings, so is this current king of Israel, in discerning good and evil, and may the Lord your God be with you. Then the king answered and said to the woman, please do not hide from me anything that I ask you. Okay? The woman's been very upfront and saying, okay, I have this request. Well, I'd like this. Yeah, but I'd really like it this way. One more thing. Okay, and each thing he patiently listens to and he addresses each one. And the king in return says, I have one thing I would like to ask you, and I just want you to tell me the truth. Don't hold anything back. The woman said, please, let my lord the king speak, just as he was so kind and courteous to her. So the king said, is it Joab? You think Joab and David might have had this conversation a time or two in private before? Joab wants Absalom to come home. And this random woman comes in with this perfect story, and King, it's you, but I still have this going on in my life also. It was Joab, wasn't it? Joab put you up to it. They know each other very well, close friends. And the woman answered and said, as you live, my lord the king, no one can turn to the right hand or to the left from anything that my lord the king has spoken. That wording is a little bit confusing too. You consult some other translations. I think they make it a little bit clearer. It seems that she's paying him a compliment here. It's like, wow, that's really impressive. We often credit Solomon, the son, with the surpassing wisdom. Well, Daddy had a lot of wisdom also, and he's had a lot of years ruling, and he sees through this, and I think she's impressed by that. So it's mentioned, let's see, where are we? Sorry, I lost it there. Verse 19. There we go. Yeah, verse 19, the middle of it. That's where I had. For your servant Joab commanded me, you're right, and he put all these words in the mouth of your maidservant. To bring about this change of affairs, your servant Joab has done this thing. But my Lord is wise, according to the wisdom of the angel of God. Or in other words, you carry the wisdom we would understand of the King of Kings, of Jesus, to know everything that is in the earth. Truly, your subjects can't hide anything from you, even though they try. So this conversation is done, and it crosses over in verse 21. Joab and the king meet up again, and the king said to Joab, all right. Again, I think this has probably been going on for some time. You did a good thing, or at least what's produced was a good thing when it's all said and done. All right, I've granted this thing. You can go. I give you royal permission. Go therefore and bring back the young man, Absalom. You can tell the joy on Joab, on his face. Joab fell to the ground on his face. He bowed himself and he thanked the king. Finally, he's able to get probably what he's been trying to get for years to this point. And Joab said, today your servant knows that I have found favor in your sight, O Lord, my king, and that the king has fulfilled the request of his servant. So Joab arose and he went to Geshur. So he makes the trip from Jerusalem all the way many tens of miles up, probably about in the neighborhood 50 to 70 miles, wherever it might be in Geshur. And he goes, he locates Absalom, and he brings him back down to Jerusalem. And the king said, all right, you can take him. Let him return to his own house, but do not let him see my face. So Absalom returned to his own house, but he did not see the king's face. Now, I think this helps to go back and to explain. If you will, let's reread together the ending of chapter 13, just the last verse, not those three together again. But in verse 39, I think it helps to explain, we often say, and it's so true, the Bible is its own best commentary. When you're like, I don't know about that, use another passage to help you to make up your mind about interpretation. Verse 39 of the previous chapter, David longed to go to Absalom, for he had been comforted concerning Amnon because he was dead. Well, does that mean, man, I just want to get my son back. I want to have him back in my presence again? Or is it that he wants to go to Absalom and give him the justice that he deserves? Is he still angry with him? Well, if you think about it, by chapter 14 and verse 24, the king says, well, he can return, but when he comes, he's not staying in the palace. He can go to his own house. And I do not want to see his face. He's not going to be seeing my face. Does that sound like he's ready to be reunited with his son? I don't think so. I think he's still upset with him. Now, there is an argument to be made also. He could be afraid of the fallout if people spot them hobnobbing together and catching up, and it might seem like he's showing partiality toward his family, not giving justice where it's due. What thoughts do you have on that, whether agreements or arguments against that?
I think probably the latter.
Okay.
That's just what I gathered from it. I think that he's smart.
He is that.
And not just that, when you go back to the infidelity and what lengths that he goes to in order to try to cover it up, I think that this is classic of him trying to say, hey, listen, we don't need to be seen together.
Saving face.
Saving face.
Okay, could be. That's fair.
Before, right?
He has, absolutely. He's smart. You think this guy's smart? Just wait till you learn a little bit more about his son. Slick guy. All right. Anything on the other side or in further support of that?
People say distance makes the heart grow fonder, but I think like there's different time kind of makes the heart like forget or at least numb a little bit.
Yeah.
Where he wasn't as passionate about his son as he once was.
Yeah, that could be. That's a possibility. I hadn't considered that, Marcy. I like that. Okay, one thing on the other side that you might consider, could he like maybe do it under the guise of night? Or even a cloak over and, at least go and visit at some point, arrange something that's pretty undercover? I don't know. I could see it either way. Good arguments that are being made, but for whatever reason, they don't see each other for some time. All right, well, we're going to switch directions a little bit and sing the praises of David's boy. Verse 25. Now in all Israel there was no one who was praised as much as Absalom for his good looks. From the sole, this isn't just his face either, from the sole of his foot to the crown of his head, there's not a single flaw you could find with this guy. And when he cut the hair of his head, at the end of every year he cut it because it was heavy on him. Don't you feel sorry for the guy? I know I do. When he cut it, he weighed the hair of his head at 200 shekels according to the king's standard. Do you have anything else in your translations about the weight of his hair? He cut once a year.
5 pounds.
That's it. Yeah, that's 5 pounds. Hair doesn't weigh very much. 5 pounds of hair is a lot of hair. All right, so this guy, he's got it all going. Physically speaking, he's got it all going for him. To Absalom were born 3 sons. So, and I'll go ahead and mention this. One daughter whose name was Tamar. Why do you think he'd choose that one? His sister who he loved so much, his full-blooded sister who was mistreated. I'm sure this is in her honor that he would do such a thing. He does seem to be a very loyal brother. She was a woman, his daughter that is, of beautiful appearance. She probably gets that in part from dad. I'm sure his wife's a beautiful lady also. And so guess what you have? But another picture-perfect family in the royal household. But man, when people get to know things behind the scenes, what a mess this family has been and continues to be. Something, of course, we could say along those same lines. We often look at one another and we say, man, everything, if I could have this as their family, if it would look, have you seen the family photo they took at Christmas last year? There is nothing wrong with that. We think that about each other, and we dream up this perfection in our mind about each other that just doesn't exist. We're all real people. We all have real families. We all have issues, and this family has a lot of them. Verse 28, Absalom dwelt 2 full years in Jerusalem, but he did not see the king's face. So how long has it been now since the king has seen his son? Talk to him? Good. We had 3 years before. Okay, I see a few paws sticking out there. So 3 and then plus the 2. Yeah, it's been 5 years. That's a long time for father and son not to speak, not even to see one another's faces. Verse 29, therefore Absalom sent for Joab to send him to the king, but he would not come to him. Why do you think Joab, who loves Absalom and works so hard to get him back, why do you think it is that he doesn't arrange for this to happen? Joab. You think he might feel like his head could be on the chopping block? I mean, he really put himself out there. He went out on the limb before just to get him back into town. So he sends for Joab to send him to the king, but he won't come to him. And he sent again the second time, and Joab won't come. So he said to his servant, see, Joab's field is near mine, and he has barley there. Go and set it on fire. Thinking, I'll get Joab's attention. That's a good neighbor, isn't it? I need to talk to my neighbor. You and I would pick up the phone, right? He sets fields on fire. Ain't no unfairness. He's tried to get his attention. He can't. So he sets his field on fire. And verse 31, Joab arose and came to Absalom's house, knocking on his door, and he said, why have your servants set my field on fire? Got his attention. Mission accomplished. He's kind of a selfish guy, Absalom. Pretty conceited. Absalom answered Joab, look, I sent to you saying, come here so that I may send you to the king to say, why have I come from Geshur? It would be better for me to be there still. Now, He's up in Geshur, probably living in the palace, and he has all the amenities of life that he wants. And he comes back, and the king says, his dad, well, you can go stay in your own house. You're not going to be in the palace. He probably doesn't have all the amenities of the king also. So from his perspective, it would be better physically for him to be back up with granddad where he was being so spoiled in the palace. Now, therefore, let me see the king's face. But if there is iniquity in me, let him execute me. I don't know if I'd make that request if I were in Absalom's shoes, but apparently he feels like he's guiltless in this matter. So finally, Joab went to the king and told him. And when he had called for Absalom, he came to the king and bowed himself on his face to the ground before the king. Then the king kissed Absalom. Isn't that nice? You have a reunion of father and son, and things have been so difficult, and it seems like, well, it's all reached ahead. It's all water under the bridge, and now this family is happy, hunky-dory. It's not just picture perfect, it's perfect again. And everybody can move on. Israel's king has experienced years of turmoil. We mentioned some of the things. Adultery, rape, incest, betrayal, murder, and hatred have plagued his administration. Now, forgiveness, exoneration, restoration, and love have enveloped the royal family. Or so it seems. How are things going to pan out next week in chapter 15? Please read that in advance. I say next week. We have singing emphasis, don't we, next week? So it'll be 2 weeks. Please read that in advance. And if you wouldn't mind, I would ask for you to memorize verse 6 of chapter 15, 2 Samuel 15, verse 6. Any closing comments, though, on chapter 14 and Absalom hiding out, Absalom coming back home, and dad and son being reunited together? Any comments on that? Questions? Okay, that's where we'll pick up the next week. Thank you.